with the election of Barack Obama, it will continue to be a problem in this country, and his election doesn't change that. But having said that, in reading the survey, and then also with just sort of ideas, early surveys I've seen in the past, and just from my own observation, I think what the survey is getting, it's a concern in search of a problem. Because while there are problems in terms of ethnic stereotypes and discrimination in this country, I don't think this is so much a problem for Asian Americans and Chinese Americans. I really don't. And I think to the extent that there are stereotypes, and stereotypes and generalizations are awful and should be avoided. But the thing about it is, I would argue that you're more the beneficiary than the victim of ethnic stereotypes, and that it's just sort of not really a problem, I think. Now, obviously, everybody can, I think it's natural for any kind of group to be hypersensitive to any suggestion of discrimination or prejudice or anything. I think that's perfectly natural, but it's a bigger problem with some groups than others. And to be honest, I don't think it's such a big I don't think it's a significant problem for you. And it kind of reminds me back of 2000 when Al Gore picked Joe Lieberman to be his running mate. I had some friends that were just really, really worried that it would trigger anti-Semitism across this country. They were really concerned of what it might bring to the surface. And every one of those people that expressed that concern, every one of these friends of mine, they were Jewish. And they were bringing their own life experiences and the history of their people, and they were really worried of what it might trigger. And you know what it triggered? Nada. It just wasn't there. And yet I never heard a Gentile express a thought that Lieberman would trigger, that Lieberman's candidacy as vice president would do this, but it was only within people in that group. And again, I think it's a hypersensitivity. And it doesn't mean that anybody in any group worried about discrimination is hypersensitivity, but I think that there's sort of, you have different levels of sort of vulnerability or exposure or inequity visited on you. And for Asian Americans, I just sort of don't think it's so much a problem. Any discrimination, any inequality is horrible and wrong. But I think if I were an Asian American, a Chinese American, this is just sort of not something I'd lose a lot of sleep over. And just sort of one other point of personal experience. I come from the state of Louisiana. And it's kind of it's a pretty weird place. I'll grant you that. But the thing about it is, 2 years ago, Louisiana elected the son of Indian immigrants, Bobby Jindal. And the thing about it is, when Louisiana elected this son of 2 immigrants from India, I guarantee you that Louisianians were not just trying to display multiculturalism to the world. Because I don't think they really care about that. But the thing about it is, they saw a guy that was just very, very bright, very talented, and who was offering some suggestions to the state that they found very appealing, and they voted for him. And I would say the average Louisiana voter has never even met anybody that was born in India, but they were open to it. And it was not held against him at all. And if anything, I think the ethnic stereotyping probably played to his benefit. And in short, I think it was an interesting study and stuff, but to be honest, unless something changes significantly in this country, I'm not sure why you'd need to take another one, to be honest, because I think it's a concern in search of a problem. And you should see this as confirmation of success. Now, I do think that a point that Antonia made that I think was very, very good is this. You show me somebody that is deeply prejudiced against African Americans, and they probably are against Hispanics, they probably are, and the thing about it is, that's not, I guess the end result is maybe a problem for the group, but what this is simply bigotry and ignorance. And the thing is, ignorant, bigoted people are generally ignorant and bigoted about a lot of different kinds of people. And thankfully, most of these people are not in any positions of responsibility in most cases, although you could look up at Capitol Hill and see a couple examples here or there. Actually, it's more than a couple, but anyway. But the thing is, for the most part, I wouldn't worry about these folks very much. I really would. I think that the Asian American community has an enormous amount to be proud of. I think you've got they've become a vibrant, important part of our country. You look at the cabinet, you look at and you should look back and say, we're very proud. And I think what all of us should do is put our shoulders to the grindstone and work to eliminate inequity and discrimination against all groups. And whether it's, even if I am not a part of a group that is discriminated against, or you aren't, we should help those that are. But to me, it's a problem in this country, but it's not necessarily one that you should have to worry about, because I think you do very, very well. But that's the white bread point of view. Anyway, Frank.
Thank you. Some of your questions and ask for comments on one another's views. If anything that one of your co-panelists has said provokes some thought, some further reflection about the glass being half full, half empty, about the possibilities for bridge building and the remaining tensions that there are among minority groups.
Well, I wouldn't want to comment on that, but something that Mike said is that during difficult economic times, particularly in the times we're in today, people turn against each other. And I was pleasantly surprised by the response in the survey, that the survey had not captured the them versus us, which I think to some degree, and sort of when you live through the dramatic changes that have happened in this country, you kind of, it's hard to step back and see the phenomenal progress that has been made. And phenomenal progress has been made. But having said that, I really think that we have to be very mindful that the United States is literally an experiment in the making that has not succeeded in the world. And that is bringing together peoples from every part of the world and uniting behind ideals. It's not ethnicity. English is the official language, but as we know in this audience, we speak lots of languages, and every one of us should speak more than one language. An educated person in the rest of the world means a person that can speak at least 3 or 4 languages. So we need to, for better understanding. And I think, that as we move forward, it's the recognition that we have to work very hard in understanding what we're doing and the cultures of others. Because if we don't do that, then we will become little insular communities. And in LA, and I'm very privileged to live in Southern California and in California. We live it every day. Our environment is multicultural every day. And what I tell folks, the funny thing, and I'm sure you've heard this joke said in the Asian community in different ways, but for Latinos, I always say, boy, mainstream loves our language because they name the streets. They love our music. They sure as hell love our food. It's just the people they don't like. So we've got to say that with the food and the language and the music, that there's a lot of good things, and for me, learning about the various many communities in this country doesn't detract from being who I am. It enriches who I am and makes me much more interesting. And I think that that's an attitude that we need to take as Americans, and embrace it and understand that it takes the time to get to know other folks.
Right, and I would agree with that, and I also would emphasize again that it's so important to participate in the process. Antonio talked about the political process and getting involved in your communities and things like that, and that is just so important into overall getting people to know you better, and to understand better. I've been sitting here trying to think whether I agree with what Charlie said about we were too hypersensitive.
I didn't say you were. I said they were.
And I'm not sure about that. I think one thing that the poll does by putting all the information out